We're gonna call this regular October 6th meeting of the DRB to order. Starting on my right, we will start introducing board members.
Kevin O'Connell, member.
Meredith Crandall, staff.
I'm Rob Goodwin, the chair.
Alex Hallas, member.
Elvira Dana, new member.
Joe Kiernan, board member.
We have two new members this evening to welcome. But before we get on to that, maybe Meredith will just do the remote meeting procedures, and then we'll get to the meat of the meeting here.
Good stuff. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. This is mostly for anyone who's viewing via ORCA Media, but it's useful for anybody who is remoting in for the first time. So for anyone viewing tonight's Development Review Board meeting via ORCA Media, you can participate in the discussion via the Zoom platform through either video or telephone access options. To join with all of the video experience, please type this link into your web browser. Alternatively, you can dial in from any telephone using this number, and when prompted, put in this meeting ID. Under either of those options, I will be notified that you want to get into the meeting and be able to let you in. If you're having problems accessing the meeting, please email me at mcrandall@montpelier-vt.org. I will be monitoring my email throughout the meeting. For those attending via Zoom, turning your video on is optional. For everyone attending remotely, please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. This will help reduce background noise. And if you wish to speak on a matter on the agenda, please raise your hand using either your physical hand or the raise hand button, and then wait for the chair to call on you. Note that the Zoom chat function should only be used for troubleshooting or logistics questions. Questions or comments about an item on the agenda need to be made verbally. In the event the public is unable to access tonight's meeting, it will need to be continued to a time and place certain. I'll now hand the meeting back over to the chair.
All right, thank you, Meredith. Approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alex, second by Joe. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. Okay, well, I'll start tonight by welcoming two new members, one full-term member and one alternate. So Elvira, did I say it right? Great. I just wanted 60 seconds to introduce yourself.
Greetings, I'm Elvira Dana, a resident of Montpelier. I actually got interested in joining the board as a result of participating in the process related to the Vermont College of Fine Arts and Greenway, and participating in public meetings there, which I found quite fascinating. So I'm glad to be here today at what looks like it will prove to be an interesting meeting. I'm originally from Northfield, Vermont. I worked for a time at Norwich, I think when Bill was teaching, perhaps. And then I lived for quite some time overseas, in Armenia, Serbia, and still, in fact, work for a nonprofit supervising offices in Central and Southeast Europe, luckily from the comfort of my home in Montpelier. So I'm glad to be able to do my part with, I hope, extensive guidance as I get my feet under me today.
Well, thank you very much. We look forward to your expertise. Certainly have probably more than you realize. Bill, if you want to come up and...
If you could, Bill, sorry, you got to go to the microphone so the minute taker can hear you. I know, it's...
It's not here.
Yep.
Is this working?
Yep.
Okay, you can hear me? Everybody can hear me?
It's for everybody remotely.
All right, let me face the audience as well as the microphone. I'm used to, I was a professor at Norwich, so I'm used to talking to, either 20 students or none, depending on what kind of class I was going to teach. But anyway, been here for 20 years. My wife and I and dog live up on Hubbard Park, really right off of Hubbard Park Drive. It's Parkside Drive. There's a little spur that comes off of there, and we loved it here. Lived there for like I say 20 years. We bought the land back in 1990, about 10 acres. Then we subdivided, and obviously that came in our first experience with the DRB. And we successfully managed that experience. And so we had to subdivide the land. We thought we would build on a larger parcel, and as things turned out, we did not. We built on a smaller parcel, which again, an experience with the DRB. And then we decided to sell the larger parcel, and we had to go through a BLA. Again, another experience with the DRB. And we finally sold the parcel just last year to a nice young couple who is now building out there on the 8 acres, really right off Hubbard Park. And they're a very, very welcomed, I say asset really to our neighborhood. So we're glad to have them, and to Montpelier, I believe. They're going to build a family. So they're naturally going to go add to the student enrollment roll. They're going to actually add to the tax roll, and so forth and so on. So we're glad to have them in a number of ways. So that's where we are. So why the DRB? Mainly because of all the experience, but living here in Montpelier, having a lot of experience with the DRB and other agencies within Montpelier, and getting to know Meredith, and respecting her very highly with what she does, how she does it, and the way she does it, and just a wonderful person. So I thought, no better thing for me to do other than, maybe play chess or ride my bike or something like that, than to help out the city, working really for Meredith, and really enjoy it. So this is my first night here, and I'm an observer, therefore I'm an alternate. In other words, if one of you all doesn't show up for some reason, then I'm going to drop into their place and be a vote. But until then, I might just sit in the audience, or it might be on the screen somewhere. So you may or may not see him. If I'm up there, then I will be influencing. So anything else? Meredith, did I cover everything? I think I got
That's wonderful. Thank you,
Okay.
Bill.
Yeah, looking forward to how this is managed. I'm going to learn a lot, I'm sure, from tonight. Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you. Thank you much. Okay, so just a few comments this evening. Just one, I want to remind everyone that the core item of the agenda tonight, we have a very sort of, I think, narrow scope to review. We are not reviewing the application. We have a specific motion for reconsideration. So I guess I would ask you to sort of listen to my, instruction as to what's going to be applicable to tonight's hearing, and also more particularly, Meredith's sort of summary as she reviews the scope of the proceeding that we are here tonight. I guess a couple of reminders that we have a very organized process that we go through here. The order of it, we will hear a summary from the zoning administrator. We will hear the case being presented by the applicant. Board members will then ask questions of the applicant. We will then hear from those interested parties. Board members will ask questions of those interested parties, and then there may be rebuttal going back and forth, but it will be very organized, and one side presenting, the public presenting, and board members asking questions, and we really can't have a whole lot of back and forth. So I really hope I don't have to use this evening. It'll make the meeting go much better for everybody. But with that being said, I think ready to turn it over to Meredith to take up our main item on the agenda, which is 0 Town Hill Road, and it's a request for reconsideration.
Yeah, so this is first time we've had this in my 7+ years here, but it is within the DRB's rules of procedure, as well as something that's allowed under state statute specifically, that a applicant can request reconsideration of a board vote. And the scope is really narrow at this meeting. It's really more procedural than not, although there might be some discussion of some facts, that the board needs to decide whether or not to reopen the hearing that was closed on the 15th, and the allowed I guess it's the standards to satisfy to be able to open it, is there needs to be either newly discovered evidence not available at the time of the original hearing, errors of law or fact that were made by the board, if there was manifest injustice, or a change in the controlling law since the motion was made and the vote was made. And really, based on both the request and my re-review of it, you're looking at sort of newly discovered evidence or available evidence, if there's more evidence available. And that in my re-review of what was happening, and this was in the memo, I think that the board did make an error in denying the prior application without being clear about why it was denied. And we can get into that in more detail when everything's actually been opened and things have been sworn in if you want. But that's where I focused in on the memo.
So I guess before we move to the applicant, and to the hearing, I think board members have questions on the process and the scope of which Meredith has laid out here. I think now would be maybe a good time to just get those out of the way before we go on to the next portion. So, anybody? Okay. So anyone wishing to speak on this application, we will hear from the applicant
On the motion?
first. On the motion, yes. Just folks raise their hand in the room wishing to speak.
I mean, if you think you might speak, it doesn't mean you have to speak. It just means you might speak.
Okay.
And just a reminder that Anthony, as attorney, doesn't actually get sworn in per se.
Yep, that's correct. We won't be asking Anthony as an attorney. That's been a sort of standard thing on the board upon request to not swear in attorneys as they are representing their client. So would everyone wishing to speak this evening, please raise their right hand to be sworn in as a witness. Okay. Right. So do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Okay, so James, feel free to come up and present your motion, request for reconsideration.
Good evening. Nice to see you in person if you're on video before, and welcome to the new board members. I appreciate you all being here tonight and entertaining the motion to reconsider. I think that last meeting, there was a lot said that didn't really relate to the question at hand. And I'm hoping that we can both present some new information to the board from DPW. So we actually get them in here at a future meeting to answer any questions as it might relate to the application and have clarity on what exactly the permit is deciding and what it's not deciding. I have been working with Anthony Irapino. The crafting of the actual request motion to reconsider is a fairly legalistic thing. So I had to get a lawyer to help me do that. It is what it is. And I wanted to make sure that he had the opportunity to introduce himself and the motion as well.
Anthony.
Yes, good evening to everyone, and thank you for indulging my remote participation. I would much prefer, well, I should say I'm on a trip with my parents, so I'm out of town, and I'm glad to be on a trip with my parents. It is midnight or a little after midnight where I am, but I'm excited to be with you. I just wish I could be in person because it is a lot easier to discuss these issues in person. I think the motion largely speaks for itself, but there's a couple of, points that just bear emphasis. And I think Meredith made those points before and in her report, but again, just for emphasis, sometimes the DRB is asked by the zoning regulations to answer very broad questions that require a lot of information, a lot of different perspective, a lot of detail. Examples of that would be sketch plan review, site plan review, where you're looking holistically. In the case of a subdivision, that's when that comes up, when you're looking holistically and you're saying, like, what is the future here? And we're going to give a lot of comments. We're going to put a lot of conditions. Similarly, conditional use review, when you're looking at big questions and questions that have a lot of perspectives, like what is the character of the neighborhood? But sometimes, and this is one of those times, you're asked a very narrow question. And in this case, the question arises under Section 3010B4, and it's really just when we know we have to put a driveway somewhere on this lot for it to be developable, and we know the city previously granted a subdivision of this property so that it's going to be developed, where is the safest place to put it from a vehicular access point of view? It's a narrow question. It's one that lends itself very specifically to the expertise of the Department of Public Works, which really focuses on the design and operation of our streets. And it's a natural tendency, I think, for those narrow questions to be somewhat unsatisfying. We all have a lot of human curiosity. We want to know the bigger picture. But in the case of our zoning regulations, when it comes to a driveway spacing exemption, a policy decision was made in terms of how detailed this analysis should be and how difficult it should be. What's the burden of proof that the applicant has to meet in order to get it? And it's not like a sketch plan review. It's not like conditional use review. It's a simple question of whether you can safely get in and out of this driveway on the street. It doesn't involve what else is going to happen on this site. It doesn't involve questions about the drainage on the site. And so we're asking you to reconsider the application for two principal reasons. One, because the party that your chair acknowledged is the, has expertise in this area. That's the DPW. They weren't at the September 15th hearing. They could have been asked to come to the September 15th hearing to speak on the speak on the question of safe and efficient vehicular access. And we think at this point it would be useful to have them here to help you answer that question. And then secondly, I know it's tricky. I don't believe anyone on the DRB is an attorney, and I'm glad that that's not a requirement to be on the DRB. We should have volunteers from a wide perspectives in the community and a wide set of experiences. But it does make your job harder if nobody on the commission knows the rules of evidence and the key concept, which I don't think requires you to be a lawyer to understand, but does require you to really think hard about, is what information is relevant to the narrow question we're being asked? What does the zoning regulations charge us? What's the question that we're charged with asking and answering? And what information do we need to have to answer the question about whether less than 45 feet spacing from the nearest driveway can still allow for safe and efficient vehicular ingress and egress from this subdivided developable lot? Understandably, again, going back to the nature of human curiosity and also the fact that sometimes the DRB is supposed to ask for quite a lot of detail before moving on in the process. We think a lot of the information that was presented to you and considered by some in voting on the motion to deny or to approve the application, and everyone did. 4 members voted to deny it. And we think that information went well beyond the narrow question of safe and efficient vehicular access. And as a result of that, we'd ask you to reconsider the decision, ask you to get the DPW in to speak to the narrow and technical question that they have expertise on. And to the extent that others are wanting to speak on it, that make sure that they are speaking specifically to the question that the zoning requires you to answer, and not to many other issues that some may wish the zoning required you to answer before making a curb cut spacing exemption call. But that in fact they don't ask you to answer before making a curb cut spacing exemption call. So hopefully you've had a chance to read our memo. Hopefully you've had a chance to read or you've heard from, but hopefully you've had a chance to read Meredith's memo. So I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have about the analysis that we've presented in there, particularly questions about stormwater management and what does and doesn't apply. But it's late here, and I know that you all are there with a single agenda item, so I'll leave it at that unless you have questions. But I would like the chance to reply as members of the public come to speak, because I'm not sure what they're speaking about in terms of the narrow scope of the motion. And I do hate to say this, but I will ask to be called on because this is a hearing that is governed by the rules of evidence. If we do get into discussions that go far afield of the narrow questions before you, I don't like to do it, and I'm sure James doesn't like to have me here to do it. But if we go far afield, I will respectfully ask the chance to be recognized to object when we've gotten off track. So appreciate your time tonight, and I'll stand by for questions. Otherwise, I'll go on mute.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions from the board? Alex.
Actually, a 3-part question. And I'll start with 310B3A, where it says that the Development Review Board may reduce spacing for residential driveways based on the site and street conditions. What do you think site means in this instance? And what do you think street conditions means in this instance?
Anthony and James, you're free to answer that.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were asking me or Meredith.
Was that to staff or was that to the
That
applicant?
is to anybody who can answer what site and street conditions
Um,
means.
Meredith, do you have anything to add to that, or should we go to the applicant?
I can tell you how I interpret it. So, and when I'm looking at something like this, site in this instance is things like the slope involved, whether there are lots of trees, what the curvature of the street is, right? What are the sight lines? Those are things that we ask DPW to take a look at. Yes, there are questions at times about the amount of traffic, but that's really not the site condition, right? So here it really is about what is it going to look like? Like we've had instances where somebody had to pick a location for a curb cut for access to a parcel that most of the street frontage was really steep cliffs. So that's not a doable place to put an access. So they had to put it way on one end of the parcel, which means it's a lot closer to other driveways. But it was also a curvy road. So, in that particular instance, there was a lot of information was requested. And when I'm saying a curvy road, I'm saying River Street after the roundabout heading, with the river on one side heading out to the very Montpelier Road, right? That's the kind of really extreme situation where a bunch of information was called in. Here it's definitely, what's the width of the street? And usually those things, it comes down to a lot of the time, does DPW approve it? Because they review those things under the V-Trans standards.
Okay, and the second question is, what's the force of the may? The Development Review Board may. Because the standard is clear, 45 feet. And it doesn't say that the Development Review Board must or should, but may. And later on in the zoning regulations, there are conditions that must be satisfied for waivers or variances.
Yep. So may means the board has the option, right? And so this is not specifically the way these regulations are reviewed, and they have been drafted. You only go to the waiver allowances in the back when they're specifically called out as waivers. We have a few places where there's other kinds of exemptions where the board has discretion. So here, yes, it does say may, which means the board, it's not a shall, it's a may. But if there's going to be a denial, it should be very clear what the denial is for. So that is where that gets tripped up and what actually happened previously. And my apologies to everybody for not catching it quick enough as to what was happening. But yes, but it is a may. It is not a required. But as I pointed out in my memo, if the board is going to deny somebody an access point to their parcel that is already an existing parcel and it is the only frontage where they can have access to try and do stuff on the parcel, we suddenly start tripping into other issues.
Well, then I guess I have a follow-up too.
Mhm.
Is it required of the applicant to prove that there is no other potential access?
But that's not what's being asked.
No, because I mean, the zoning regulations also have a preference for shared driveways on adjacent properties.
Right, but
Yeah,
what's
but-
before us, sorry for the moment, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
This
Kevin.
point.
Kevin.
What's before us at this moment is either yes or no
For reconsideration.
for reconsideration and then a hearing
The facts.
on the facts.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I see this as a really simple exercise.
Yep.
And, we can go around the bush
Yeah.
up 50 times, but
Clarity on the regulations that apply, I think, is fine. But yeah, the question is, are there more facts? Is there more information that the board should have that wasn't available at that last meeting? And were there potentially errors made in the way things were done?
I have a lot of catching up to do, but maybe I have the luxury / burden of jumping in the middle. So I did get to review the previous meeting, and the references to Department of Public Works involvement also calls up this sentence. In the case of any conflict, the city's public works specifications would take precedence over standards of this section. So am I correct procedurally that if Department of Public Works has specified that the location that's in fact already cut or not cut because it didn't exist, non-existing, corresponds to Department of Public Works specifications? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So basically, that's it's a fancy way of saying if the Department of Public Works says the location is good, then it overrides that 45 feet spacing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anthony has his hand up.
Anthony, go ahead.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, just want to point out the reason why we're talking about 3010 B3A, but B3B, wait, 3010 B4, whichever it is, the subsection B. those are really two options for the applicant. That, yeah, and I agree, it is discretionary with the board, whether to grant the spacing exemption. But the reason why we're talking about B4, those are the two choices that the applicant has, the subsection A and subsection B. And we're not asking about it because the site there's no other place on the site to, cut the curb or on the street, or the street conditions are strange in terms of where you could cut the curb. We're asking because physically, wherever you put the driveway, it's going to be less than 45 feet because of the driveway across the street. So subsection A really doesn't apply. We're not asking because of subsection A reasons. We're asking because of subsection B, the physical infeasibility because of where the neighboring driveway is. And I don't know if that's because that driveway is one of the other driveways that doesn't meet the physical spacing on the street, but there are many on this street that don't meet the 45 feet, and that was something you discussed at the last one. But I just want to make that clarification as to, while I appreciate the question about subsection A, we're not asking for a subsection A exemption. We're asking for a subsection B exemption.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
I'm new, I'll keep asking. And just to be clear,
Yeah.
the purpose now of the discussion is merely to review the motion.
Yes.
So we are not getting into the further details of the previous.
That's correct. And I think we got two. We have the question to reconsider. And I think then we also have to talk about the scope of our review upon reconsideration. So I guess I want to have a little discussion on the board because I think that there is the second part of this, some discussion about whether we, I guess, limit this to the location of the curb cut as it relates to safety and really the review that Public Works has already done, or if there are aspects of the location of the curb cut between points A and B on this parcel, wherever it can be, that do relate to drainage in some way. And I think that answering the question about does drainage apply and how limited is our review on drainage as this comes back. And I think that's important because Public Works, if they were to come back upon reconsideration, may need to answer specific questions about that, and they need to know what those are. Does that make sense?
Summed up the question.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're trying to determine whether or not we're even supposed to consider drainage. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's the second part of our hearing tonight, because we have to, talk about the scope of what we're gonna narrow the discussion to at the next meeting. Yes.
Okay.
For the reopened hearing, whether it's the whole application, if it's just 3010, if it's other general other things that were noted in that staff report. So other provisions like the erosion control, right? And so there were things that were discussed. Some of those, even in my staff report, I said don't apply for various reasons. And some of them I had applied administratively and approved administratively. And they would have been either completely administrative, or there's some argument in the motion to request to reconsider, that say that they shouldn't have applied at all even. And so the question is, how broad is the board going to be looking at things if they reopen the hearing? Because the applicant and any other experts or witnesses need to know how much information they need to prepare. So is
I
it
understand.
just that spacing question and stuff under 3010, or is it also, like I did in my potential motion here, is it also like 3008 erosion control? Are there other things that you want to have information on that lets, the applicant know if they need to have an engineer present and what type of engineer, all of those things.
So that was part of the reasoning behind my asking about site and street conditions too, is
So
how those are defined.
Yeah.
James, you've had your hand up if you want to respond.
Yeah, if I could, I think there have been three terms used just in the last few minutes: drainage, stormwater, and erosion control. And those are different things. And I think it'd be good for the board to have clarity on what you outlined in your memo, which was related to 3008, which references erosion control, which is effectively during the construction process. Are you putting up the right erosion control measures and mitigations to make sure that there's not runoff during the construction process? There's stormwater, which is more kind of like permanent infrastructure related to capturing and managing stormwater. And then we mentioned drainage, which I think kind of is a more general term that probably doesn't apply here to the zoning. So I think it's really specific. And what we were trying to lay out was that the fill was administratively approved, and absolutely that Meredith correctly laid out and called out in that administrative approval for that section that we would have to comply with all of the related erosion control requirements that the city has. There's the space, the location of a curb cut is not development. As if you go into the regulations and read the section that defines what is development and what is not development, clearly fill is called out as development. Changing a structure is called out as development. Building a new structure is called out as development. Locating a driveway, granting permission for a driveway to go in a certain location is not development. In the Montpelier zoning regulations, and I can't remember exactly which page. So I think it's important as you think about like the erosion control measures, we are absolutely required to comply with the erosion control measures as laid out by the city, and the engineers called that out and put it on the plan, and Meredith noted that, and we're not contesting that. We absolutely want to do that. It was a pretty narrow question about stormwater is different, and that did not and does not apply. And then there's the erosion control, and I see Anthony has raised his hand. Maybe he'll correct me where I was wrong.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I don't mean to correct James.
Please
'cause
do if I'm wrong.
No, well, I agree that erosion prevention and sediment control, which again applies to the construction phase, not to the as-built conditions of the site, just when you're opening up the earth, and thus there's a higher risk of sediment being washed away. So are you doing things like placing silt fences around the area that's raw earth that's exposed? Are you putting erosion matting blankets? That applies, and as James said, they intend to comply with that. But I do just also want to point out that Section 3008 does not empower the DRB to deny a permit, particularly a driveway exemption, spacing exemption request over erosion prevention and sediment control. It's not a power of denial. It's a question of potentially putting more conditions to make sure that sediment doesn't wash down the hill when the curb is being cut, or in this case, it's really not the curb being cut, as James said, because it's not development, it's the fill being placed. But it's not a question of you can say no to the permit because of that. So I just wanted to add that aspect in as you consider A, whether it applies or not, and B, if it applies, how it applies.
All right. Thank you. Catherine, yes.
Discussing whether to reconsider the decision. I'll just open to say similar to Elvira, I was not there for the last meeting. I was out of town. So I watched the recording. So having watched the recording, yeah, I appreciate Meredith, your memo, including the notes around the conversation straying at times from the, the stated purpose around the decision. Maybe that was more clear to me watching it at 11 p.m. on my couch. But I'm just want to speak up in support of reconsidering the decision and also thank Meredith for putting the memo together on the staff side.
You're welcome.
Great. Anyone else from the board? We'll get to y'all in just a second here. You're the next phase. So
back and talk about what you're reviewing here, what is being considered to be reviewed as opposed to the other issues of mitigating runoff and all that, which
I'm sorry, I cannot hear people not at the
up to
microphone.
the microphone.
so the purpose of this meeting tonight is that you were reviewing to reconsider the motion that was put down, if I'm stating that correctly, on the 15th. And so you created a narrow scope of what it is that we're reviewing, correct?
Yes.
That is about cutting the curve. Is that correct?
There are two questions we're trying to answer.
Okay.
One is, are we going to reopen it?
Right.
And two, we reopen it. Are we reviewing the entire application, or are we answering very narrow questions on the application?
Right. And I thought that was already established that we were doing a very narrow scope. Are we not? Are we?
No,
If we're open to all of this, then
No, so the narrow scope tonight ultimately is, does the hearing get reopened? But part of that decision is, if it gets reopened, how far does it get reopened? So that's what the board's discussing, because they have to be able to give the guidance to, neighbors, the applicant, myself, to pass on to city departments
Right.
as to what kind of evidence or comments needs to be brought back at the reopened hearing if it gets reopened. So they're discussing the legal aspects of these different provisions as to which ones of them actually should be applied right now. That's why they're going. There's no motion been made.
So is that any different than what was talked about before? And I wasn't here on the 15th. So meaning, are there other aspects of that particular issue being brought into this that weren't brought in before?
I'm sorry. I think there were too many layers of time and everything there. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay, and
I
stay
can,
patient with
I
this.
can,
Just
I can.
trying to
Yeah,
understand, really what the scope is here. Because that will determine everything, I think. So,
Who are you?
Just hold
I'm
on a
sorry.
second.
My name is Christopher White, 184 Town Hill Road.
Great. So we segued into the public comment portion. So Chris, I think if you have anything to expand upon as far as recommendations from your point of view as to what the scope is as an interested party, and tonight, then
I mean, that's really for you guys to determine.
Okay.
And maybe I'm incorrect, but I believe that the scope really is cutting the curve, cutting into the curve. There's other issues around that and what that's going to lead to, what it affects, but really it's about cutting the curve and revisiting that ruling or your opinions from the 15th.
yes. Great,
So-
thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, on this. Trying to.
Yes, thank you. All right, so we'll take the next speaker. If you want to just state your name at the microphone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Ball, address 219 Town Hill Road.
Thank you.
I have a few notes, please bear with me. So as far as I understand it, the applicant is seeking reconsideration for the board's September 15th denial of the application under section 3010. And that motion rests in two arguments. One, that the board improperly considered irrelevant evidence. And that two, the board should have heard from the Department of Public Works before ruling. My first question is, where was the DPW on September 15th?
I'm sorry, is that a question you want answered right now, or is you have a bunch of questions to keep track?
It's my first open-ended question, which was, if it was so important to have them weigh in on this decision, where were they? They should have been there. I think the applicant correctly notes reconsideration akin to Rule 59E. We've seen there's been extraordinary remedies before, but really used only when there has been either newly discovered evidence unavailable at the time of the hearing, but it seems that the DPW had already weighed in prior to September 15th, but they weren't there. And also that, they've reopened extraordinary remedies in situations where the tribunal committed a manifest error of law of fact. So, I don't think that reconsideration is an opportunity to relitigate issues that have already been argued. It seems to me that the DPW should have been there on the 15th if that conversation had already happened. And I'm just going to kind of end with that, my concerns still hold. We are not here to discuss whatever structure is going to go on the buildable parcel. However, it definitely should be thought of when considering the volume of traffic that may or may not be going up and down this driveway when this driveway gets built, should it get built. So I just want that to be in the back of everybody's mind. I don't believe this to be a project that is going to be the construction of a single family residence. And so that could be a great number of cars.
So I think we're just going to have to rein it in a little bit on talking about the proposed development, because that's not in our purview here.
Last meeting, it's going to be a single.
Okay, you can just speak from the audience.
So I know we're here to talk about a curb cut and we're here to talk about a driveway, but a driveway exists because cars need to go on it. So I ask the board to please consider the possible implications of volume of traffic based on what may or may not go there, because none of us really know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. State your name at the microphone and go right ahead.
Robert Pesci, 169 Town Hill Road.
Thank you.
After the last meeting, James followed us out and told me he has a 7-foot right of way that goes onto his property. And he doesn't know
sorry, we can't.
But this is very relative because it was asked if he has other access to this property. He was given, he's told me he was given a 7-foot right of way. We had Zach from the Department of Public Works at our house 2 Fridays ago. We talked about the cistern that he gave my partner an ultimatum after the meeting that.
Mr. Chair, I have to object.
Yep.
This is hearsay testimony. You can't repeat something that's.
For this, sir.
Wait. So can I just? I'm sorry.
There are rules, sir.
Hold on.
Hold on one second. So you've raised something that was not proven at the previous meeting. So this is a potential fact, right?
Okay.
That should maybe be cleared up if the hearing's reopened.
He told us that he wasn't going to do anything to mitigate the water onto our property. He didn't agree to his. And Zach, this is 100% with this. Zach was at our house 2 Fridays ago.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah, sorry. We're just sorry. We're
This is hearsay evidence. It's objection.
That was being put in.
And
he said it was going to go across my property to the pond. So you guys.
If it's reopened, he can testify about this. If it's reopened.
Yeah, if it's reopened, we can approach those issues and rule on them at that time.
Thank you.
Dana DiMartino, 169 Town Hill Road. I know this is about the curb cut, the driveway. I get that. I love your earrings. My dad's an engineer for a very large corporation. You build the driveway, you know what you're building it to, right? And I know that's not what we're talking about. Thank you, Anthony. I know. But it matters because how big is that curb cut? Is there 2 cars coming up? Is it just 1 lane? Like, this is a big deal, even just with the curb cut. It is a big deal to know what we are talking about. I know it's a different meeting, but James has been at those Act 181 meetings, as I'm sure you guys have too. I know there's a housing development of some sort. I'm not dumb. And I know we need housing. I live here too. I get it. This is a rural area. This is not going to fit. It's going to change the character of our community.
Can't get testimony on the future development. Next speaker, please.
My name is Larry Forsyth. I live on 75 Grandview Terrace. My property completely abuts the whole property that's in question about making the cut. So I guess my big concern is that I was never informed that this cut was going to happen until one of my neighbors brought it up. So I'm really disappointed in the board here that I wouldn't be informed that this was going to be here, because I actually came to the wrong meeting earlier and Meredith said, no, that's the one at 7. And so I was never informed that this was going to happen. So I don't know.
Hold on a second. Can I just clarify? Were you talking about the previous meeting or tonight's meeting about being informed?
Either.
Either. Okay.
I've never been informed of either.
I'm sorry, can you give me your address again?
75 Grandview Terrace. And I know that you have to be within 500 feet of where the cut's going to be. And I don't know if my properties, I thought I've read that before. So I don't know if my property's considered that or not. Do you need me to give you a map?
I'm pulling up the map right now.
Okay. Just trying to...
Yeah, I don't have access to my server to look at the abutter list. You should have received a.
So right here, I understand this is from Zillow. This is not the one from the city.
So you have to be at the microphone. I know you're in a butter. What I'm saying is I can't go pull up my Excel spreadsheet right this second to see if you were on the list to get a mailing for the original hearing, because the way my computer got updated, I can't get into this server. So
but
you should have
everyone like to see how I abut or not. If you don't,
I can show it up on the screen. If you just
said you're having a problem.
No, as in Garen, I'm gonna go look at the Excel spreadsheet developed that would have created a letter for you so that I can double check whether a letter was sent. That's what I was going to check, not whether or not you're in a butter. I wasn't clear what it was you wanted me to show. I was trying to give you I was trying to check a different piece of information to be able to see whether or not I had mailed you the letter, not whether or not you're in a butter. So if you give me a second, I can share it so that everybody can see it.
Well, can I just suggest that for the respect of everyone's time, that's not really relevant to the issue at hand. The
Anthony,
gentleman
I'm
is
sure you had time to talk earlier.
No, sir, you're at the meeting, so you've been given notice. And if you need to take up the
question. I'm not at the meeting and I wasn't given notice.
You're at this meeting, sir.
Harder.
But it can't have this back.
This is something it doesn't affect the decision of the board.
Anthony, hold on.
Can we just try and get this in order here? We're trying to juggle the online Zoom in the room, and
I was just trying to say where I was located. That's all I was trying to do. That's all I was doing. So everyone knows.
What does it have to do with the motion?
I apologize.
Okay.
Meredith, I apologize. Anthony, I apologize. Now can I ask my questions?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Because I didn't know about this meeting, I just want to know if it's in my purview that I should get an opportunity to bring a lawyer myself, if that's the case, because they were able to bring a lawyer. So I wasn't known about this meeting, so I wasn't able to bring someone to defend myself. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about, because he was able to have representation, but I was not able to have representation, because it's kind of giving me the impression that because Anthony knows what he's supposedly doing, and it's always good that we have individuals that aren't lawyers and things like that. So I'm under the impression that there's some legalese happening that I might not know about. And that's what I'm concerned, is that I don't have proper representation for this matter. That's my first concern. It's not a question, it's a statement. I understand. I will get to my actual question in a second because I'm very concerned about that. Also, my other concern is I didn't receive the letter. And then the other is the very concerned about the size of the cutout, just as someone else said before. Really would like to know about the size because does it need to be 2 lanes? I think that's very important. And as we found out before, you already made a determination. So it's up to them to basically change your minds. Or what you're saying is you want an impact, I don't know, about $2.5 million worth of taxes with this cutout. But that's fine. And so I guess that's my real concern is, do I need to have legal representation? Because he brought legal representation. And if it's going to be redetermined that we're going to go through this again, I just want to know if that's something that's recommended or is that of my own purview.
There's nothing preventing you from bringing legal representation.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Also, this question's come up a couple of times about the size of the driveway. I think it's important to note that we're just talking about whether or not there is a driveway allowed there. The size can be changed after the fact, depending on the development, correct?
Right. So this is a curb cut, right? And I understand the desire to link that with a driveway. And yes, there's some fill going in that is a potential location for a future driveway. But if future development requires a wider curb cut, Department of Public Works would require that wider curb cut. That would be part of the future development review, as well as where the actual driveway would go and the what kind of surface it would be, how many lanes it would have to be, whether or not there would need to be island in the middle. Those are all things that you look at later. There's the board can't require that an applicant plan future development, right? Just like in a subdivision application, the question is what you're doing now allowing for future development, right? So even in a subdivision, the board just looks and says, is there a potential place where a curb cut could go that meets future requirements, even if it's under this exemption to the spacing, right? You can't, we can't, like I can't approve in the administrative subdivisions. You guys can't approve in the major, what we now call major subdivisions, a subdivision that creates a parcel that does not have access. And under our current rules, we can't even create one that doesn't front on a private or public street.
Okay.
So, but you don't lock them into a particular development.
Right.
You don't lock them into, I mean, this isn't saying this is the only size that the curb cut can be. It's here is a curb cut when, whether it's James or a future owner or owners decide what's going to happen there, the width of the curb cut will be revisited at that point.
Yes. So we are basically, the size of it is irrelevant then. There is no size.
There's a minimum, right? There's a minimum size that can be allowed
Yes.
under the V-Trans residential standards. And there's a range allowable within there.
I guess the term curb cut might be confusing. We're not actually talking about a physical curb cut. We're
Here we
talking
are.
about-
There's a curb here.
Yes, but we're talking about really access to the public right away.
Yeah, this is access to the public right away.
Which okay. So I think, yes, physically the curb will be cut, but what we're actually supposed to be deciding on is, can he access the right of way in this location?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hold on. So it's
And
everything.
that's later, right? But that's the scope. Is that the scope of the review later?
Okay.
Or other factors coming in? So that's one of the issues, but that is the narrowest scope.
Okay.
That the board could consider at a future meeting if it was reopened.
So moving with the process here, as everyone in the public gotten a chance to speak. Okay. Thank you.
I can't talk about.
We're letting everyone get their first turn and
I had my hand up. Yes.
Hi, my name is Seamus Lombardo. I live at 15 Grandview Terrace. This is my first one of these meetings. I'm excited to be here. I just want to express my support for reopening the motion and the curb cut. Much as my neighbors, who I greatly respect, are alluding to, the potential negatives of what is at the end of that driveway, I want to bring up, the potential positives of what's at the end of that driveway. We're in a housing crisis. I've got a child on the way. I really care about this town.
Wait,
And so
that's not what it's about, where's Anthony?
I'm just expressing my
Yeah,
support.
thank you.
for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, my question is like, am I in a butter? I want to understand that because it's my first meeting.
Yep. And you are 15, right?
Yeah.
So give me 1 second and I'll reshare the screen once I've got it up. So you don't share a boundary. Give me 1 second. So you did not get notified because you don't share a boundary. So here's the parcel. Hold on, I'll turn off the light. And I'm sorry for this little doohickey here. So this is the parcel at issue,
Yep.
okay? And you are here.
Yes.
So what we do is we look at parcels that touch and then parcels that are on the other side of right-of-ways.
Okay.
And so, we err on the side of caution and we go kitty corner as well. Lauren should have gotten notified and I'll need to look back at our records. I think Lawrence was one of the people that for this particular meeting, I could not find a phone number or an email address. I may have left a voicemail. I'm pretty sure we sent a written notice of the original hearing, but I'll have to go back and look at the spreadsheet of addresses. But yeah, you're over here, so that's why you didn't get specified notice of this.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Robert.
Right there on that map, you can see it's 2 lots. So I don't know who joined the 2 lots together, and that's just something that town does.
So can you just remind you that this is about the question on whether to reopen?
Leave 2 different lots right there, and the driveway is supposed to be going through one of them to another one, but.
No, I'm so confused.
And the negligence of leaving a curb cut open to a 16-foot drop because it saved $350 in taxpayer money.
This is
very relevant.
No, it's completely,
in a driveway. If a car drove off of that, wow.
this is not relevant to the
And the cistern,
question before us.
cistern that the town.
Not relevant to the question before us. I'm sorry.
Driveway went in. It's gonna be stormwater coming off the.
Sorry, sir.
Zach told me that water was gonna run across my property. That is 100% related to the driveway going.
It's
in.
not relevant to the reconsideration motion before us. Okay. One from the public, one more comment here. Thank you.
Something new, please, if at all
Well,
possible.
so as he alluded to, is everyone aware that the curb was cut? So everyone knows that Town Hill Road is being
Sorry,
repaved.
if you could just say again what your name is so
Sure.
that when the
It's
minute taker is writing it
184
down.
Town Hill.
Thank you, Christopher.
Is everyone on the board aware that the curb had been cut?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Why was that acceptable? And that's an open question, and I know that's not relevant to the review of the topic at hand. But we know how wide it's going to be. We know that it was cut, well before the meeting. And yes, it's been filled in since. So
I can answer this. I mean, I did factor it into my decision at the beginning,
okay.
which is why I voted to deny. Since then, I've learned some things. Basically, we shouldn't have taken that into consideration. I do share your concerns about it, which is why I did factor it in at the beginning. But but that doesn't change kind of the scope of what was actually before us. And so going forward, it won't factor in anymore, but I do share your concerns.
Yeah.
I do understand them.
I think
So,
that Joe is correct.
Again, I'm more than happy to keep this to, why we're here, and that's the review of the curb cut. That's what I expect to see and expect to hear here, the review of that rule and that decision.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that, the chair would agree with what Joe had said, and I would just say that I think that, the fact that the curb being cut was, an element that complicated the discussion at the previous, hearing, and part of why we are, why we are here. And so, I think as the chair at this point, I'll go on the, the record and say that I fully support the, the reconsideration here. I'm sensing from the board that we're leaning in that direction. I think go further to say that, any factors that they were taking up in the reconsideration really just have to do with the location of the curb butt between point A and point B. It does not have to do with a yes or no as to whether there will be a curb cut or there will not be, a curb cut. So I guess we're leading towards a motion here, but I think that it would be enough to limit it to, just that. Where is the curb cut located between, point A and point B on the frontage of the parcel? Yes.
I don't feel that it would affect my consideration of anything here, but I live at 252 Grandview, just to put it on the record.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
So I have a question.
Yes, Alex.
Does that mean that no procedural issues would be part of our discussion upon reconsideration?
Procedural issues.
Well, the ones that Joe just said he was mistaken in taking into consideration. The fact that the curb cut was made preemptively in advance of the decision.
Yep. So that, because that was not the zoning approval, right? That was Department of Public Works doing their thing. And their own deciding, right? And as what's happened, I believe, the DRB had a verbal denial. We didn't have the written decision, but DRB denied it. So I let DPW know. And so my understanding is put that curb back in because it was a procedural issue. But those kinds of, I have no control over DPW. The board has no control over DPW. And so that having happened isn't something that the DRB can control.
Right.
It's one of those things where if there are, okay, I'm just gonna throw this out there. Sometimes the city does something and forgets to come to me for a permit first. And so then we have to go back and I have to say, you needed a permit. You still have to, we have to do the fees, we have to do all the stuff, and you got to fix it, or you got to change it because you didn't do it right. So that's kind of what happened on this case too. And so, there's a lot more coordination now than I think there used to be between my department and Department of Public Works. But there's also, procedural stuff. But that was, it's not something that should have factored into the board's decision on whether or not to approve or deny.
But it might factor in at some point into board discussion.
Right now, it's sort of a factor in that it was considered, and so it shouldn't have been considered. That's a legal reason. It was an error of law in how the decision was made, and a reason to reopen the hearing. Exactly,
Right.
Because the board can't issue a written decision that factors that in as one of the findings of fact without it being, wholly appealable. And so, the city doesn't want the board to do that.
I guess I have some questions. Again, as a new member, I needed to fact check myself, having not been present at the prior meeting. But my understanding, based on viewing the meeting and reviewing the notes and so forth, is that had this parcel had significant enough frontage, or the location of the driveways had been such that the 45-foot guideline were already met, the DRB would not have met to review this proposal at all.
Correct.
Because the question of fill was administratively approved, so it only remained to discuss the curb cut relation to the insufficient number of feet, which is sort of an impossible math puzzle in this case. So to my mind, jumping in partway through as I am, a reconsideration does make sense. But considering what the scope of that discussion might look like, I did want to bring up something that came to my attention when I was trying to understand the situation. So I think we've primarily discussed 3010, just the curb cut issue, which obviously is at hand here and would need to be discussed. But then the question about whether 3008 applies comes up. And the thing that strikes me in the site plan is that the steepest slope is labeled at 29.99%, which is 0.01% away from the 30 or greater slope criteria for required erosion control and engineering plans, if I understood correctly. So even though there's this fractional discrepancy, it does seem to me that it would be appropriate if, and I do think it makes sense to reconsider the case, if it's reconsidered, to not limit the scope strictly to 3010, but to return potentially to the question of 3008, because the slope is so very, very close to that 30% point. And I may be missing a whole lot of things here because I'm brand new, but.
I guess I would tend to agree, but also back to the review still being, the location of the curb cut still existing somewhere
Yes.
on that frontage, and maybe showing a better location versus a not as good location related to slopes and whatever it may be. Yes, Meredith.
So can I just ask a clarifying point, Elvira? So are you, when you say the 29.99%, are you looking at the slopes table that's on the proposed site plan? Okay, so I'm gonna, let me just share my screen.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. And just clarify a point here. Yep. As this goes to whether or not to reopen that 3008 discussion. So our zoning regulations for that erosion control, the chart in figure 3-10, basically breaks things out into 3 areas, right? Things that are below 15% slopes, things that are at 15% or greater up to 30%, and then the greater than or equal to 30%. So with these, the base level information we ask people for is to give us the square footage of slopes in those categories. So when I look at this, right, and this is the proposed site plan, there's this amount of slopes that are between that 15 to 29.99% for the proposed. The existing, I don't know why these are 2 different things. The existing had an amount of slopes in that range as well. If there had been 30% or greater slopes being impacted in any way at all, right? Not necessarily disturbed, but involved in the work area, right? They would have had to show me that on here. We just haven't hit that trigger point, and the zoning regulations have to have cut and dry trigger points, or it becomes really, really hard to administratively approve anything.
So that 0.01% is material.
That 0.01% is fully material.
This really means that the yellow is slopes that are less than 15 and the green are slopes that are less than 30. It doesn't mean that any of them are 29.99% of
Right,
the
I
slope.
understand.
Okay.
Yeah, and so because we didn't hit those trigger points, I don't then make applicants go back and get me even more detailed engineering information and more minutia. Because there was, and this is actually just to bring it up, because this is the first meeting for you on this. These ranges are actually a recent change. So the most recent change just in July on how we deal with slopes and erosion control and what the trigger points are. We used to require more minute information. And so things like somebody just installing or widening a stairwell to get access from their front door to the street triggered, you need an engineered plane, you have to go to the DRB and all of that. So we're working with this right now as our first few months of this stepped back, more higher tier review of slopes impacts and erosion control. And so if the board has feedback about that and is saying that it's potentially problematic, get me that. I can move it to the planning commission because the planning commission is doing a really detailed deep dive on all of the zoning regs. So, but this is, there is this balancing of how much detail do you require? And so they've sort of stepped back to those trigger points a little bit. 30% slopes is remaining a trigger point for a reason. But they had to provide enough information to say, did we hit these trigger points?
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. In that case, I understand that this component of the original request was administratively cleared, and really the scope of further discussion does seem to my mind to relate only to the 3010 then, I guess.
Thanks.
James, Anthony, any additional rebuttals or comments?
Not for me. Thank you.
Appreciate your thoughtful consideration. Thank you for your time.
What's the pleasure of the board? We have I guess a couple options here. I guess one option we haven't done in a while, although I do think it allows for much more sort of detailed deliberations, is to take up our decision on this in a deliberative session. Yes, Meredith.
So I just want to make a clarifying point. So for this particular one, you could go into deliberative session, but the motion really needs to be in the public hearing part.
Sure.
So we'd need to like close down the ORCA streaming and the recording and have other people leave the room, but we're all here. So that would be doable. It's not like the deliberative sessions that were done when we were strictly remote and during COVID, where you didn't vote until the public hearing was fully closed. But because of this one and the way it goes, I think that it would be especially if it is reopened and a specific hearing date is set, that motion needs to be in the public hearing.
And it's one motion
Yes.
to reopen, and not a motion to reopen and a motion on the scope of what we're
I would include the scope within the motion, which is one reason a deliberative session may make sense, so that the board members can discuss what they're thinking a little more freely and, be able to ask each other questions and thoughts if you want to.
Why couldn't we just close the public hearing?
Well, like I said, because we can go into deliberative session and not close the public hearing, but because of the subject matter, because people need to know when the hearing is. And so that applicants can, move forward with their, because otherwise I have to do a written decision. If you do the motion in the public hearing, the recording of, especially if it's a motion to approve, if it's a motion to deny, we still have to do a written decision. If it's a motion to approve and reopen the hearing, you can set all of that in the minutes, and the minutes is going to be the record of that decision. Sorry, I'm trying to save myself some work.
Yeah.
And we want to save you.
Just wanted to understand what we were
Yeah.
getting into.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can do it because ORCA can shut down the microphones.
Yeah.
And then everybody who's here would go out in the hallway, and then when the deliberative session is over, they can
Okay,
come
we're
back
doing
in.
this to save, staff
Yeah.
resources.
Yes.
If at all possible, and you want to do a deliberative session, that would be my preference, if at all possible.
And if we open to reconsider, and decide not to open to 308,
Mm-hmm.
are we opening it to all of 310?
I mean, this is the discussion to have in deliberative session,
Discussion.
is for the board to figure out if they're reopening, what exactly is the scope of it, so that you can work out the wording of the motion. Versus, having all the splatter and guts of the cooking session be all over everybody.
I guess the chair's recommendation is that I actually think we would save time by going into deliberative session to have this discussion and get a answer to everybody much sooner this evening due to it being a little bit more efficient. That's my inclination. And I would recommend a motion just to make sure we consider everything to include 3010 and 308 and and yes, to reconsideration
So that's your thought, is to have both of them for the reopened hearing?
for the, yes.
So, but
That's not a motion. I'd look to the pleasure of the board here to
That's a labeling of what the executive session will take up. That's a description.
could be. I'm just trying to move the conversation along to get to the motion so we can get to the
yeah,
deciding. And
so if somebody wants to make a motion to go into deliberative session, it's not closing the hearing, it's just moving to go into deliberative session to discuss what the board's gonna do.
Yeah, in which case we could make it a general motion.
Yeah, this is just a general, if that's what the board wants to do, it's a general motion to go into deliberative session.
yes.
And
Let's not complicate it further.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yep.
so,
Is that a motion, Kevin?
It's a motion.
okay, so
Kevin moves to go into deliberative session to discuss the future motion.
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call vote. Catherine,
yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Vera,
Yes.
Joe.
I mean, no, I have enough to vote now.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Rob votes yes. So that's 1, 2, 6 to 1.
Fi-
5-1.
5-1. Don't
5-1.
count me. Remember, I don't vote.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so that passes, and we
Yep.
will be efficient here.
And thank you for everybody, all the board members actually being here, because I don't have to try and open a separate Zoom.
not something that we we aim to do, but I think it was the right decision to have a good educated discussion among all of us, and really actually save time. So thank you very much. And with that, we do have a motion to bring up, and I will entertain that motion.
Motion to reconsider application Z 2025-0091 with the hearing to reopen on November 3rd, 2025. Subject of discussion limited to whether the proposed access to Town Hill Road complies with section 3010. And the board specifically requests that the applicant provide an updated site plan that shows the driveway across the street, corrects the abutting property owners, and shows means of alternative access to the parcel or lack thereof, and any other changes the applicant is proposing. The board also requests that DPW be present at the reopened hearing to testify regarding the proposed access locations locations compliance with DPW and V-Trans standards, including but not limited to sight lines.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the rule.
Motion by Joe, a second by Alex. I guess we will have some discussion on the motion. And any board members have anything to say? Nothing to add. I think we can take one question at this time, or can we not?
Oh my God, I don't know as you can. The discussion is supposed to be among the board members. I think that people could theoretically say something after if you wanted to, as part of like a general thing but yeah, I think once you make the motion, I don't think, I mean, unless you ask the applicant if they can make sure they can show up on the 3rd. That's the only potential like
Yeah,
pick
I
up in
guess
there.
we'll let you answer that question. That's relevant.
I mean, you requested the 3rd, but has anything come up, James, that means that you can't attend on the 3rd?
I believe the 3rd is fine. I had a clarifying question about one of the conditions, but I can ask that afterwards of Meredith to
Yeah,
get
I
clarity
think
if that's what I should do.
Once the decision gets written with the minutes.
This won't have, in the minutes. I mean, yeah, it's gonna say exactly that. It won't, I mean, people can ask. Yeah, I mean, I think he can ask the question.
Yeah,
I think that's
clarify
fine.
motion.
Sorry, you just mentioned something about the abutters and I didn't understand that if it was related to,
The site plan had an error on it.
okay,
That didn't properly have the names of budding property owners on it. It's a sort of a ministerial thing, but it was something that should be corrected on the site plan.
Can
That's
reach
all.
out on the details of
great.
that.
I didn't know if it was related to the
No,
public comments because that was not our doing.
no. It didn't have to relate to
Okay.
who got
Happy
notification.
to
That's
make-
something I'm going to be double checking on, but no, it just had to do with the fact that on your site plan, it actually misses a label for one of the property owners.
Happy to put that.
That's all.
Great.
Okay. Motion and a second, and no further discussion from the board. We'll start with a roll call vote. Catherine?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Alira? Joe?
Yes.
Rob, the chair votes yes. That would be 6-0, and it passes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
So yeah, as a effectively procedural matter, just like if you were voting to continue a hearing, there isn't going to be a written decision other than the minutes on this one. But there will be revised full public hearing notices in the newspaper and mailed out, and all of our standard procedures before the November 3rd hearing date. That's one reason we had to go at least as far out as November 3rd.
All right.
Most board actually knows why the vote has changed that dramatically, and why this was considered at all. Because I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing what changed from the last time we were all here, or at least everyone was here.
I think I testified to the fact that I had entertained information, evidence that was not to be entertained. directly related to the stormwater questions and other things that are not material to the legal right-of-way access that the permit was, or the application was requesting. Yes, that I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Errors of fact, I believe,
And law.
and law.
Yeah.
Right, so irrelevant information, so things about the future use, right, and what that was going to be. Things like that came into people's consideration that they mentioned during the hearing, the board members raised as reasons for making the vote they voted before to deny the application. So this reopens it, and the consideration of the fact that DPW wasn't present to testify to certain things at the last hearing.
Is that a requirement? I've heard that.
No,
several
so
I mean, you let it pass, like you open the curb.
okay, so
And now you're
So-
gonna bring them in or do.
so this is I am happy to discuss.
I think, so
I'm happy to discuss separately because this is a whole separate, we're suddenly going off into other stuff. So I am happy to tell you what I normally pull into for an application that I, as the zoning administrator, is forwarding to the board. I don't want to necessarily take up this meeting with it. I can tell you, Department of Public Works usually does not show up in person for this type of application. They submit their documentation, which was in that original application packet, saying, we're good with this curb cut. That was in that original application package.
and I guess, I will just, acknowledge all the testimony that's been brought up to this, that I think is about matters that aren't under the purview of this board, and would direct you to, sort of issues with public works and general drainage on Town Hill Road, that city council was probably the body with authority to, address those concerns. So that's kind of just where I want to point you to make sure that, that you don't go unheard. Meeting minutes for 9:15.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from 9:15, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved for
Oh,
9:15.
Well, do you want to call the nays because?
Nay, anyone,
Okay,
it's
thank
getting
you.
late. It's getting late. Anyone opposed? No one
I
opposed?
just-
Thank you, Meredith.
Everybody. Thank you, sorry. I
Late.
just know that wasn't all the voices, so it's okay. We got at least.
Okay, our next meeting is going to be Monday, October 20th. We have one application. I
Yes.
believe it's an appeal, and I think everyone should have information distributed all on that already. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Joe, second from Kevin. All those in favor say aye. Nays? None. Great.